You have 72 hours to remove that animal, or I'll have you evicted." Karen's red manicured finger pointed at my service dog like he was a criminal. Little did she know, within 3 months, I'd be the one removing her in handcuffs. This is how a HOA president's war against my therapy dog led me to uncover the biggest fraud our community had ever seen. My name is Barbara Reynolds, and I never wanted to be at war with anyone. At 62 years old, I'd spent 35 years teaching elementary school, retired to a quiet life in Riverside Gardens community, and wanted nothing more than peace. Max, my golden retriever service dog, was my companion, my therapist, and quite literally, my lifeline. I'd adopted Max 3 years ago after my diagnosis post-traumatic stress disorder following a severe car accident that took my husband, David. The nightmares, the panic attacks, the crippling anxiety that made leaving my house feel impossible. Max changed everything. He was trained to recognize my episodes before they spiraled, to ground me during flashbacks, to wake me from nightmares. He wasn't just a pet. He was medical equipment, with fur and a wagging tail. Riverside Gardens was supposed to be my sanctuary, a gated community of 200 homes, manicured lawns, a community pool, and strict regulations that promised order and tranquility. I'd moved here in January of 2023, after selling the house David and I had shared 4 decades. Too many memories. Too much emptiness. For the first year, life was peaceful. My neighbors were friendly. I'd wave to Mrs. Patterson next door as she tended her roses. Mr. Chun, across the street, always complimented Max's gentle nature. The HOA seemed reasonable, just basic rules about lawn maintenance and noise levels. Then, in March of 2024, everything changed. Karen Mitchell became HOA President. I'd seen her around the neighborhood before, always impeccably dressed. Always in that signature red blazer with matching red glasses perched on her nose, blonde hair styled in a sharp bob that looked like it cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She drove a BMW and carried herself with the kind of confidence that bordered on arrogance. Her election campaign had promised stricter enforcement of community standards and increased property values through regulation. I'd voted for her opponent, a retired lawyer named Tom Bradford, who seemed more interested in community building than rule enforcement. But Karen won by a narrow margin, 103 votes. Within 2 weeks of taking office, I received my first notice. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late March. A crisp white envelope with the HOA logo slipped into my mailbox alongside the usual bills and advertisements. I opened it at my kitchen table, Max's head resting on my lap as I read. Date: March 26th, 2024. Property: 42 Riverside Lane. Owner: Barbara Reynolds. Violation: Section 7.3 of HOA. No animals over 25 pounds permitted on community property. Required action: remove animal within 72 hours, or face fines of $50 per day, with possible eviction proceedings. Submitted by Karen Mitchell, HOA President. My hands trembled as I read it twice, then 3 times. Max looked up at me, sensing my distress, and placed his paw on my knee, his trained response to my rising anxiety. "It's okay, boy," I whispered, stroking his golden fur. But my heart was racing. I grabbed my copy of the HOA bylaws from my file cabinet. I'd reviewed them carefully before purchasing the house. Section 7.3 did exist, but there was more to it. The full text read, "No animals over 25 pounds permitted on community property, except as required by federal law. Service animals were protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act." I knew this. My therapist had explained it thoroughly. Max had every legal right to live with me. I called the HOA office immediately. A bored-sounding receptionist named Denise answered. "I received a violation notice about my service dog," I explained, keeping my voice steady. "But service animals are exempt under federal law. There must be a mistake." "Hold, please. Elevator music. 3 minutes. 5. Then, "Ma'am, President Mitchell says the exemption doesn't apply. You'll need to comply with the notice." That's not legally accurate. The ADOC clearly states, "Ma'am, you can appeal at the next board meeting." That's April 15th. at 7 p.m. Have a nice day. Click. I sat there, phoning and fury and fear mixing in my chest. Max nuzzled against me, doing his job, keeping me anchored. I wasn't going to wait for a board meeting. The next morning, I drove to the HOA Office, a small building near the community entrance. Karen's BMW was parked in the designated president's spot. Inside, the office was pristine. Beige walls, modern furniture, framed photos of the community. Karen sat behind a large desk, typing on her laptop. She looked up as I entered, her red glasses catching the light. Mrs. Reynolds, I assume you received my notice. I did, and I'm here to clarify that Max is a service animal protected under federal law. The ADA supersedes HOA regulations. Karen leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing at her lips. I'm aware of the ADA, Mrs. Reynolds. However, you'll need to provide documentation proving your dog is legitimately trained as a service animal, not just an emotional support animal. There's a difference. I pulled papers from my Max's certification from Canine Companions for Independence, my therapist's letter, his training records. Here, everything is in order. She barely glanced at them. These will need to be reviewed by our legal team. Until then, the 72-hour notice stands. That's not legal. You can't, Mrs. Reynolds. She stood, crossing her arms. I understand you're attached to your pet, but rules exist for a reason. Multiple residents have complained about barking, about waste on common areas, about their own safety. This community has standards. Max doesn't bark. He's trained not to, and I always clean up after him. Who complained? That information is confidential. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. She gestured toward the door. I didn't move. I'm not removing my service dog. He's legally protected. If you continue this, I'll file a complaint with HUD and the Department of Justice. For just a moment, something flickered in Karen's eyes, surprise, maybe anger, but she recovered quickly, her smile returning. Do what you feel you must, Mrs. Reynolds. But understand this, I take violations seriously. If you choose to defy this notice, the fines will accumulate. $50 per day adds up quickly. That's $1,500 per month. Can you afford that on your retirement income? She raised one perfectly manicured hand in a dismissive gesture. The threat was clear. She'd looked into my finances. I left without another word, Max walking calmly beside me. But inside, I was shaking. That evening, I called my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She was 75, had lived in Riverside Gardens for 12 years, and knew everyone. Barbara, dear, what's wrong? You sound upset. I explained the situation. There was a long silence. That woman, Mrs. Patterson finally said, her voice tight with anger. She's been on a power trip since day one. Last month, she'll fine the Hendersons $300 because their mailbox was painted cream instead of pure white. $300 for a mailbox? Has anyone else had problems with her? Oh, honey, half the neighborhood. She's issued 62 violation notices in her first month alone. In 12 years, the previous board issued maybe 20 total. People are terrified. She threatened to put a lien on the Martinez property because their teenage son's car was parked on the street overnight once. Why isn't anyone fighting back? Another pause. Fear? Mostly, she's got lawyers. She's got money. Most of us are retirees on fixed incomes. We can't afford legal battles. And she's relentless. She'll smile to your face and destroy you behind your back. After we hung up, I sat on my back porch, Max beside me, watching the sun set over the community lake. This was supposed to be my peaceful retirement. Instead, I was facing harassment from a petty tyrant. But I'm not one to back down from bullies. I'd spent 35 years teaching children to stand up for what's right. I'd be damned if I'd let Karen Mitchell intimidate me. The next day, I contacted a disability rights attorney named Michael Chun, relation to my neighbor. His consultation was free, and his advice was clear. She has no legal ground to stand on. Said firmly. Service animals are protected. Period. If she continues, You can sue for discrimination and harassment. Document everything, every conversation, every notice, every interaction. Will that stop her? It should. Most HOAs back down fast when they realize they're violating federal law. The fines for ADA violations start at $75,000. No HOA wants that liability. Armed with this information, I drafted a formal response letter, citing specific ADAR provisions, Supreme Court cases, and the potential consequences of continuing her discriminatory actions. I delivered it to the HOA office on April 1st, April Fool's Day. Appropriately enough. Karen read it while I stood there. Her face remained neutral, but I saw her jaw tighten. "This changes nothing," she said finally. "You'll still need to appear at the board meeting on April 15th. Until then, fines are accumulating. You're now at $400. Those fines are illegal, and I won't be paying them. Then we'll place a lien on your property, and eventually we can foreclose. It's all in the bylaws you signed when you purchased your home." She laughed a sharp, brittle sound. I walked out, my heart pounding. Max pressed against my leg. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Mrs. Patterson had said, 62 violations in 1 month. That was excessive. Unusual. Almost as if Karen was deliberately targeting residents. But why? At 2 a.m., unable to quiet my racing thoughts, I went to my computer. I started researching HOA fraud, embezzlement, abuse of power. The stories I found were horrifying presidents who'd stolen hundreds of thousands, even millions from their communities. Most were caught eventually, but only after years of theft. A thought crept into my mind, dark and suspicious. What if Karen wasn't just power-hungry? What if there was more to it? I spent the next week gathering information. I requested financial records from the HOA as a homeowner. I had that right. Karen delayed, then provided only partial documents. Red flag number 1. I talked to more neighbors. The Johnsons had been fined $600 for having a garden gnome that violated aesthetic standards. The Patel family faced $850 in fines for parking their RV on their own driveway for 3 days while loading it for vacation. The Williamses were threatened with eviction because their teenage daughter's bedroom lights stayed on past 10 p.m., allegedly violating light pollution rules that didn't actually exist in the bylaws. Every conversation revealed the same pattern: excessive fines, threats, intimidation, and always Karen's red glasses-wearing face, smiling while delivering devastating news. On April 14th, the day before the board meeting, I received another notice. This one made my blood run cold. Fines now total $700. Action required. Remove animal by April 15th at 6 p.m. or eviction proceedings will begin April 16th. Note, your property deed gives the HOA authority to foreclose for violation non-compliance. Legal action will be swift. Signed with a flourish. Karen Mitch, President. I looked down at Max, sleeping peacefully at my feet. Over my dead body would anyone take him from me. But as I stared at that notice, at Karen's signature, at the threat that could cost me my home, a realization settled over me. This wasn't about my dog. This had never been about my dog. Karen wanted me gone. The question was, why? And tomorrow night, at that board meeting, I was going to start finding answers. The next evening, as I prepared for the 7 p.m. board meeting, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Reynolds. A man's voice. Nervous. Yes. My name is Tom Bradford. I was the previous HOA president, the one Karen defeated. I heard about your situation with your service dog. Yes, I need to meet with you before tonight's meeting. There are things about Karen Mitchell you need to know. Things I discovered right before I was forced out. Meet me at the coffee shop on Pine Street at 5. And Mrs. Reynolds. Be careful. Karen is more dangerous than you realize. He hung up before I could respond. I stood there, phoning and Max, looking up at me with concerned brown eyes. What had Tom discovered? And why did he sound so afraid? What do you think Tom discovered about Karen? Drop your theories in the comments below. And don't forget, you won't believe what Karen has been hiding. Tom Bradford's warning echoed in my mind. Karen is more dangerous than you realize. As I sat in that coffee shop waiting for him, I had no idea I was about to uncover a conspiracy that would shake our entire community to its core. What he showed me that day would change everything. The coffee shop on Pine Street was called the Daily Grind, a cozy place with mismatched furniture and the smell of fresh espresso. I arrived at 5:15 p.m., 15 minutes early. Max at my side. The barista smiled at him, offered him water, which I gratefully accepted. I chose a corner table, far from other customers, and waited. Tom Bradford arrived exactly at 5. I recognized him from the election materials mid-60s. Gray hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, but he looked different now. Tired, almost haunted, he glanced around nervously before sitting down across from me. "Thank you for meeting me, Mrs. Reynolds. Please, call me Barbara. And thank you for reaching out. What did you want to tell me about Karen?" He pulled out a worn manila folder, but didn't open it yet. "First, I need to explain some history. I was HOA President for 8 years. During that time, our community thrived. We had a surplus of $230,000 in our reserve fund. Our annual assessments were a reasonable $1,200 per household. Maintenance was done on time. Wheat and budget. We were a model community. What changed? Karen moved here in July of 2023. Within weeks, she was attending every board meeting, volunteering for committees, positioning herself as someone who cared deeply about property values. She was charming, professional, persuasive. When I announced I wouldn't seek re-election, my wife's health was declining. I needed to focus on her. Karen immediately announced her candidacy. He paused, took a sip of his coffee. His hands were shaking slightly. During the campaign, strange things started happening. Rumors spread about me that I'd mismanaged funds, that I'd given contracts to friends, that I was secretly planning to raise assessments by 40%. None of it was true, but the damage was done. Karen positioned herself as the reformer who'd fix my alleged corruption. She won by 6 votes, I said, remembering. 103 to 97. Yes. And the day after a victory, I received an envelope at my home. No return address. Inside were photos. He opened the manila folder. Inside were several 8-byten photographs. My stomach turned as I looked at them. They showed Tom and a woman, his wife, entering a hotel. Another showed them through a window, embracing. A third showed them kissing in a parking garage. "Tom, I don't need to see. Look at the date stamp." He pointed to the corner of one photo. "August 9th, 2023. I don't understand. My wife Linda died on June 30th, 2023. The woman in these photos is her sister, Martha, who came to stay with me after Linda's death to help me through my grief. We were never romantic. She's like a sister to me. She's married with 3 grandchildren, but these photos, taken from specific angles, made it look like an affair." I felt sick. Karen took these, or had them taken. The envelope came with a note. "Withdraw from all HOA activities, or these go public." I was devastated. Even though I'd done nothing wrong, the optics looked terrible. My wife had just died. Martha's husband would see these. Heir, children. Our community would think I'd betrayed Linda's memory. So I disappeared. I stopped attending meetings. I let Karen take complete control. That's blackmail. Yes, but I had no proof it was her. And by then, she had power. The board 4 other members were all people she'd cultivated. They voted her authority on everything. Max placed his head on my lap, sensing my agitation. I stroked his fur, trying to process what Tom was telling me. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you're not the first person she's targeted, Barbara. You're just the latest. In the past year, 23 homeowners have left Riverside Gardens. 23 in a community of 200 homes. That's over 10% turnover in 12 months. People move. Not like this. I did some research after I withdrew. I talked to several who left. Every single one had been targeted by Karen. Excessive fines, harassment, threats. The Hendersons left after Karen claimed their home-based bakery business violated residential zoning, threatened them with $50,000 in fines. The Rodriguezes left after Karen accused their son of vandalism with no evidence and threatened to call ICE their third-generation Americans, but she weaponized their Hispanic surname. The Chengs left after Karen claimed their koi pond was an unauthorized water feature and threatened daily fines of $200. I thought of Mrs. Pattis' Word 62 violations in Karen's first month alone. She's forcing people out. But why? Tom leaned forward, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. That's what I've been trying to figure out. Before he left, I noticed something odd. Karen pushed through an emergency vote to hire a new management company, Pacific Property Solutions. They charge us $75,000 annually, nearly triple what our previous company charged. When I questioned it, Karen said they were premium service and would enhance property values. The board rubber-stamped it. Let me guess she has connections to this company. I don't know. I tried to investigate, but I had no access to records anymore. But Barbara, here's the thing: after she took over, our assessments increased. She claimed it was necessary for infrastructure improvements. We went from $1,200 per household annually to $2,400. She doubled our fees. I did the quick math in my head. 200 homes times $2,400 equaled $480,000 annually. Where's all that money going? Exactly. I drive through the neighborhood regularly. I haven't seen major improvements. The pool hasn't been renovated. The landscaping is the same. The roads haven't been repaved. So where is nearly $500,000 per year going? We sat in silence for a moment. Max shifted, resting more fully against my leg. You think she's stealing? I said finally. I think someone needs to look at the books very carefully. Someone she hasn't managed to intimidate or force out. Someone with a legitimate reason to request full financial disclosure. He looked at me meaningfully. Mior Kaiser, disabled woman being harassed over a legally protected service. Animal, that's sympathetic. That's defensible. And homeowners have the right to review financial records. She can't refuse without raising serious red flags. She's already delayed my first request. Request them again. Formally, in writing, certified mail. If she refuses, you have grounds to file complaints with the state regulatory board. HOAs are required by law to provide financial transparency. I thought about the board meeting, scheduled in just over an hour. What should I do tonight? Present your case about Max. Stay calm. Cite the law. Don't let her provoke you. She tried that's her method. She pushes people until they lose their temper, then uses their reaction against them. Stay professional. But also, at the end of the meeting, formally request a complete financial audit for the past 18 months. All expenses, all contracts, all vendor payments. Request it publicly so the other board members hear it and it's in the official minutes. Will that work? It'll force her hand. She either have to comply, which will expose whatever she's hiding, or she refuse, which gives you ammunition for legal action and regulatory complaints. He raised his hand, as if taking an oath. Either way, you'll have her on the defensive. He stood, gathering his folder. Be careful, Barbara. I mean it. Karen is smart, and she's ruthless. She destroyed my reputation with doctored photos. She's forced out nearly 24 families. She won't hesitate to come after you harder if she feels threatened. I'm not afraid of her. Maybe you should be, but I'm glad someone is finally standing up to her. Good luck tonight. He left, and I sat there with Max, my mind racing. I had just over an hour before the board meeting. I spent it preparing. The board meeting was held in the Community Center Modisk building with a large meeting room, folding chairs arranged in rows facing a long table where the board sat. By the time I arrived at 6:45 p.m., about 30 other residents were already there, chatting nervously. Karen sat at the center of the table, flanked by 4 board members. Richard Chun, a nervous-looking accountant in his 40s. Susan Martinez, a real estate agent who seemed to hang on Karen's every word. David Park, a retired engineer who rarely spoke. And Jennifer Walsh, a young lawyer who'd moved to the community just 6 months ago. Karen wore her signature red blazer, red glasses perched perfectly, blonde hair immaculate. She looked like she was chairing a corporate board meeting, not a neighborhood HOA gathering. At 7 p.m. exactly, she called the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. We have a full agenda tonight, so let's begin. First item: approval of last month's minutes. The minutes were approved with no discussion. Then came Treasurer's report. Chun mumbled through some numbers that meant nothing without context. Approved. Then committee reports, landscape, pool, architectural review. All approved in under 20 minutes. Then Karen smiled. Next item. We have several violation appeals. First up, Mrs. Barbara Reynolds regarding the unauthorized animal at 42 Riverside Lane. It's not unauthorized, I said, standing. Max stood with me, his service vest clearly visible. He's a service animal, protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Mrs. Reynolds, please wait to be recognized before speaking. I'm a homeowner addressing a violation that affects my property. I have the right to speak. A flash of annoyance crossed Karen's face, but she gestured for me to continue. I laid out my case clearly and calmly, citing specific HOA provisions, the definition of service animals, the legal protections, and the illegality of her fines and threats. I presented Max's certification, my therapist's documentation, his training records. The ADA is clear. I concluded, service animals cannot be banned by housing communities, and any attempt to do so is discrimination. I'm requesting that all fines be removed and that I receive written confirmation that Max is recognized as a service animal in compliance with federal law. Karen listened with a small smile, occasionally raising her hand to examine her nails. When I finished, she laughed that same brittle sound I'd heard in her office. Mrs. Reynolds, your passion is noted. However, this board must balance individual requests against community standards. We've received numerous complaints about your animal barking, aggressive behavior, property damage. That's a lie. Max is a trained service dog. He doesn't bark unnecessarily. He's never aggressive. And I've caused no property damage. Who complained? I want names. That information is confidential to protect residents from retaliation. Convenient, you're making accusations without providing evidence or allowing me to face my accusers. Karen's smile tightened. Senora Reynolds, I understand you're emotionally attached to your pet. He's not a pet. He's medical equipment. But this board has a responsibility to all residents. We'll take your appeal under consideration and notify you of our decision within 30 days. 30 days. The ADA doesn't allow for 30-day delays. This is cut and dry. Service animals are protected. Period. This meeting is not a courtroom. Mrs. Reynolds, if you're dissatisfied with our process, you're welcome to pursue legal remedies. But until then, fines will continue to accumulate. You're now at $1,050. Gasps around the room. Several residents exchanged shocked looks. I took a deep breath. Remembering Tom's advice, stay calm. Don't let her provoke you. Then I have another matter to raise. As a homeowner, I'm formally requesting a complete financial audit of this HOA for the past 18 months. I request all expense reports, all vendor contracts, all bank statements, and all documentation of how homeowner assessments have been spent. I'm making this request under state law, which requires HOAs to provide financial transparency to homeowners. The room went silent. Karen's smile vanished. For just a moment, I saw something in her eyes, fear, anger, but she recovered quickly. Such requests must be submitted in writing with appropriate notice. I submitted a written request 3 weeks ago. You provided partial records only, because full compilation takes time. We're volunteers, Mrs. Reynolds, not paid staff. You hire a management company that charges $75,000 per year. Surely they can compile financial records. I'm formally requesting for the public record, that complete financial documentation be provided within 10 business days, as required by state statute. Richard Chun, the treasurer, shifted uncomfortably. Karen, maybe we'll discuss this in executive session. Karen cut him off sharply. Is there any other business? No one spoke. Then this meeting is adjourned. She stood abruptly, gathering her papers. But I wasn't done. One more thing. I'd like the minutes to reflect that I've requested the financial audit, including specific documentation of the $75,000 annual payment to Pacific Property Solutions, the doubling of homeowner assessments, and an accounting of where those increased funds have been allocated. Karen's jaw clenched, noted, meeting adjourned. She walked out quickly, the other board members trailing behind like confused ducklings. Susan Martinez threw me a hostile look. Jennifer Walsh looked thoughtful. David Park avoided eye contact. Richard Chun looked genuinely worried. After they left, several residents approached me. "Thank you," Mrs. Patterson whispered. "Someone needed to ask those questions." Mr. Johnson shook my hand. "We've been wondering where all that extra money is going. Our property doesn't look any better than it did 2 years ago." A younger woman I didn't know, Will Angela Torres, pulled me aside. "Be careful." My brother Carlos was on the previous architectural committee. He started asking questions about expenses last year. Within 2 weeks, Karen had him removed from the committee and hit his family with $4,000 in trumped-up fines. They left 3 months later. Why didn't he fight? He tried, but Karen has lawyers on retainer. She threatened to tie him up in legal battles that would cost tens of thousands. He couldn't afford it. Most of us can't. She raised both hands in a gesture of helplessness. I drove home with Max, my mind churning. Kara was definitely hiding something. The question was, what and how much? That night, I couldn't sleep. At midnight, I was at my computer, researching Pacific Property Solutions. The company had a basic website generic language about premium property management services, but no client list, no detailed service descriptions, nothing substantive. Dug deeper. Corporate records showed Pacific Property Solutions was registered in Delaware, common choice, for companies seeking privacy. The registered agent was a corporate services firm, which meant the actual owners were hidden behind layers of legal structures. But then I found something interesting. A business license application filed in our county showed Pacific Property Solutions listed an office address. Suite 1203, 347 Cedar Boulevard. I pulled up Google Maps. That address was an executive suite rental facility, a place where you could rent a mailbox and occasionally use a conference room, but not a real office. A shell company. My heart raced. I kept digging. Corporate filings, business registrations, property records, and then, at 2:17 a.m., I found it. Pacific Property Solutions was registered on June 15th, 2023, 2 weeks before Karen moved to Riverside Gardens. The registered agent was Maurice and Associates, a corporate services firm, but buried in the paperwork, listed as corporate secretary, was a name, Mitchell Holdings, LLC. I searched Mitchell Holdings. Another Delaware company, another layer of obfuscation. But this one had a single member listed in old paperwork that hadn't been properly redacted. Karen Mitchell. Karen owned Pacific Property Solutions. She'd created a shell company, gotten herself elected HOA president, then hired her own company to manage the community, paying herself $75,000 per year of homeowner money. But that was just the beginning. If she was willing to do that, what else was she hiding? I spent the rest of the night documenting everything I'd found, taking screenshots, saving documents. By the time the sun rose, I had a folder of evidence, but I needed more. I needed proof of where all that money was really going. The next morning, I received an email from Richard Chun, the HOA treasurer. The subject line read, "We need to talk. Privately. ASAP." The message was brief. "Mrs. Reynolds, I can't discuss this over email or phone. Can you meet me at the parking lot of Riverside Park at 9 a.m.? Come alone. I have documents you need to see. Documents about Karen. But if she finds out I'm talking to you, I'll lose everything. Please. This is bigger than you realize. I stared at the email, my pulse quickening. Was this a trap, or was Richard Chun about to become my ally in exposing Karen's fraud? I had 1 hour to decide. Max looked up at me, his brown eyes steady and trusting. Whatever happened, we'd face it together. I typed my response. I'll be there. What do you think Richard is going to reveal? Could this be a trap, or is Karen's treasurer finally ready to expose her? Comment below with your predictions. Richard Chun's email shook me to my core. This is bigger than you realize. As I drove to meet the HOA treasurer in secret, I had no idea I was about to receive evidence of a fraud so massive it would send Karen Mitchell to prison. This meeting changed everything. Riverside Park sat on the edge of our community, 10 acres of trees, walking trails, and a small parking lot that was usually empty on weekday mornings. As I pulled in at 8:55 a.m., I saw only one other car, a silver Honda Civic. Richard Chun's car. Max and I approached cautiously. Richard sat in the driver's seat, watching nervously. When he saw me, he got out, carrying a large expandable file folder. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, rumpled clothes like he hadn't slept in days. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, glancing around. "We need to make this quick." "What's going on, Richard?" He opened the file folder. Inside were dozens of documents, bank statements, invoices, contracts, spreadsheets. His hands trembled as he pulled them out. "I've been the HOA treasurer for 3 years. I took the role seriously. An accountant by profession. I understand fiduciary responsibility. When Karen became president, she immediately wanted control of all financial matters. She said the previous system was disorganized and needed professional oversight. Let me guess, Specific Property Solutions." His eyes widened. "You know about them. I discovered last night that Karen owns that company. She's paying herself $75,000 per year from HOA funds." Richard closed his eyes, let out a long breath. "It's worse than that, Barbara. So much worse." He spread documents across the hood of his car. "Look at this. Our annual budget shows $75,000 to Pacific Property Solutions for management services, but look at these bank statements." I leaned in, studying the numbers. Monthly withdrawals to Pacific Property Solutions, $6,250, matching the annual total of $75,000. But then I saw other entries. "What's Riverside Maintenance, LLC?" I asked, pointing to another monthly charge of $4,000. "Another shell company." Primera looked at. Up, same Delaware registration, same registered agent as Pacific Property Solutions. Karen owns that too. What are they supposedly doing? Landscape maintenance. But look, he pulled out another document. "We already pay Green Valley Landscaping $3,500 monthly for actual landscape work. Riverside Maintenance doesn't do anything. It's just another way for Karen to funnel money to herself." I felt sick. $4,000 monthly was $48,000 per year. Combined with Pacific Property Solutions, that was $123,000 annually that Karen was stealing. "There's more," Richard continued, his voice shaking. "Summit Property Inspections monthly fee of $2,500. Also, Karen's company, Apex Community Services, $1,800 monthly. Also, hers. Riverside Security Consulting $3,000 monthly." Hersov found 7 different shell companies, all owned by Karen, all billing our HOA for services that either don't exist or are already covered by legitimate vendors. I did the math quickly. That's over $200,000 per year. $234,000, to be exact. But it gets worse. He pulled out more documents. "See these? Emergency repairs to the pool house, $42,000, paid to Summit Contracting." I went to the pool house. No repairs were done. The contractor doesn't exist. Another shell. Road resurfacing, $68,000, paid to Riverside Paving. Our roads weren't resurfaced. Another fake company. Security system upgrade. $35,000. We don't have a new security system. My head was spinning. How much total? In the 18 months since Karen took control, I estimate she's stolen approximately $1.2 million from our community. $1.2 million. I couldn't breathe. Max pressed against my leg, sensing my distress. Why didn't you report this sooner? Richard's face crumpled. 3 months ago, I went to the other board members with my concerns. Susan Martinez told me I was being paranoid. David Park said I should trust Karen's expertise. Jennifer Walsh said without proof of criminal intent, it's could be accounting errors. What about going to the police? I planned to. But then his voice broke. Karen found out. She called me into a private meeting. She had photos, Barbara, photos of me with my assistant, Rebecca. We'd worked late several times. Completely innocent, but the photos made it look like an affair. Karen said if I made any accusations against her, she'd send those photos to my wife, my employer, everyone. She'd destroy my marriage, my career, everything. The same playbook she'd used on Tom Bradford. Blackmail. Rebecca is 24 years old, Richard continued, tears forming. My wife Linda would never believe nothing happened. We've been married 32 years. This would destroy her, destroy us. So I stayed quiet. I hated myself every day, but I stayed quiet. Until now. Until I saw what she was doing to you, a disabled woman and her service dog. That's when I realized if I don't stop her, who will? How many more people will she hurt? He raised both hands, palms up, in a gesture of surrender. I looked at the documents spread across the car. This is evidence of major fraud. Embezzlement. We need to go to the police. Now I know, but I need protection, witness protection from her retaliation. And we need an airtight case. Karen has expensive lawyers. She claims accounting errors, misunderstandings. We need to prove criminal intent. How? He pulled out one more document and email printout. This, I retrieved it from the HOA email server. It's from Karen to herself. She forgot our system archives everything. Look at the date. July 10th, 2023. 1 week after she moved here. I read the email, and my blood ran cold. From K. Mitchell at riversidehoa.com to kmitchellpersonnel@gmail.com. Date July 10th, 2023. Subject: Project Timeline. Phase 1. Months 1, 2, 3. Establish control. Eliminate opposition. Win presidency. Phase 2, months 4 to 12. Increase assessments. Install shell companies. Begin extraction. Phase 3, months 13 to 24. Accelerate extraction. Target dissenters. Force turnovers. Phase 4, months 25 to 36. Exit strategy. Transfer funds offshore. Relocate. Target extraction. $2 to $3 million over 3 years. Current progress, on track. Opposition neutralized. Extraction rate, $19,000 per month, increasing to $30,000 per month by the second quarter. This wasn't accidental accounting errors. This was premeditated theft. Karen had planned this entire scheme before even moving to Riverside Gardens. She came here specifically to rob us, I whispered. Yes. And according to this timeline, she plans to extract another $1.8 million over the next year and a half, then disappear with all of it. We have to stop her, but we need to be smart. If we go to the police now, she claimed the email is fabricated, that I'm a disgruntled treasurer, that you're biased because of the dog situation. We need irrefutable evidence, bank records showing where the money went, proof the shell companies are hers, documentation that the services were never performed. How do we get that? That's why I contacted you. You've already requested a financial audit. If the full board votes to approve it, we can hire an independent forensic accountant. They'll uncover everything. Karen can't stop it without looking guilty. And once it's official, she can't destroy evidence without committing additional crimes. The board won't vote for it. They're all under her control. Not all of them. Jennifer Walsh, the lawyer, she's young, ambitious, but she's not corrupt. If we present her with preliminary evidence that suggests fraud, she'll support an audit to protect herself legally. She won't want to be implicated if this blows up. What about the others? Susan Martinez is Karen's puppet. Forget her. David Park goes along with whoever seems to be winning. If Jennifer supports the audit and we present compelling preliminary evidence, David will flip to protect himself too. We only need 3 out of 5 board votes. I thought about the strategy. We need to move fast. If Karen suspects we're building a case, she'll accelerate her exit strategy. Agreed. The next board meeting is in 11 days, April 26th. Between now and then, we gather everything we can. I'll compile financial documents. You work on proving the shell companies are fake-checked if they have actual offices. Real employees, evidence of work performed. Document everything. What if she comes after me harder? The fines, the eviction threats. Let air. Every aggressive action she takes against you while you're investigating strengthens our case for retaliation and harassment. It proves her pattern of silencing dissent. Just document everything. Keep a log of every interaction, every threat, every fine notice. Max nudged my hand. I stroked his head, thinking, this was dangerous. Karen had already destroyed Tom Bradford's reputation and intimidated Richard into silence. What would she do if she discovered we were building a case against her? But I thought of the $1.2 million already stolen, the families forced from their homes, the elderly residents living in fear of arbitrary fines. Someone had to stop her. I'm in, I said. Let's take her down. Over the next 10 days, I became a detective. Every morning, I drove 2 different addresses listed for Karen's shell companies. Every single one was either a UPS store mailbox, a vacant office space, or a registered agent service with no actual business presence. I photographed everything. I collected business cards from legitimate companies nearby. I documented empty suites with 4 lease signs. Pacific Property Solutions, leased at office, Suite 1203 at an executive rental facility. I walked in, asked the receptionist if Pacific Property Solutions worked there. Never heard of them, she said. We have 300 mailbox clients. Most never come in. Riverside Maintenance, LLC, supposedly a landscaping company. The address was a residential home. Karen's own house. I drove by daily. No trucks, no equipment, no employees. Just Karen's BMW in the driveway. Summit Property Inspections. Another up-store box. I asked the clerk if anyone ever picked up mail for that name. Once every few months? Maybe. Blonde lady with red glasses. I documented everything. Meanwhile, Richard secretly copied financial records, bank statements showing outgoing payments, invoices from the shell companies, all professional-looking, all fake. Contracts signed by Karen authorizing the payments to her own companies. We communicated through a shared encrypted email account, never using our personal devices. Richard was terrified Karen would discover what we were doing. On April 20th, 6 days before the board meeting, I received another violation notice from Karen. This one was almost laughable. Violation. Dog observed walking on grass in common area without owner carrying waste disposal bags. Fine, $500. Total fines now due $1,550. I photographed myself with Max, standing next to the waste bag dispenser I'd installed on my own property, showing my bag holder attached to his leash. I documented that I always carried bags. The violation was completely fabricated, but it proved Richard's point. Karen was escalating her harassment as retaliation for my questions. On April 23rd, I approached Jennifer Walsh. I found her at the community pool with her young daughter. I asked if we could talk privately. She agreed. Curious. Jennifer, I need to show you something that concerns the HOA's legal liability. I showed her preliminary evidence, not everything, but enough. Documents showing payments to companies with no physical presence. Contracts for services never performed. The pattern of shell companies with the same registered agent. I'm not making accusations, I said carefully. But as a lawyer, you know that board members can be held personally liable for financial mismanagement if they had reason to know about irregularities and didn't act. Her face went pale. You think Karen is stealing? I think we need a professional forensic audit to either confirm everything is legitimate or identify problems before they become legal issues for the entire board. Either way, you're protected by doing due diligence. She was quiet for a long moment, watching her daughter play. The audit request, you're going to push for it again at the next meeting. Yes. If I support it, Karen will be furious. If you don't support it, and this later proves to be fraud, you'll be legally liable. You're a lawyer. You know the risk. She nodded slowly. I'll support the audit, but you need to present compelling preliminary evidence at the meeting enough to justify the expense. An audit costs money. I will. 3 days later, the evening of April 26th arrived. The board meeting. The moment of truth. I arrived at the community center 30 minutes early. Richard was already there. Looking nervous. Jennifer gave me a small nod. As residents filed in, I noticed something unusual. There were twice as many people as normal. Word had spread. People wanted answers about their money. At exactly 7 p.m., Karen called the meeting to order. She looked confident, powerful, in her red blazer and glasses. She had no idea what was coming. First item on the agenda, she began with a smile. Final decision on the Barbara Reynolds animal violation. Before we discuss that, I interrupted. Standing, I have evidence of financial irregularities that this board needs to address immediately. Evidence that affects every homeowner in this community. Karen's smile froze. Mrs. Reynolds, that's not on the agenda. Then I'm adding it. As a homeowner, I have the right to raise issues affecting our community. I pulled out a folder thick with documents. Jennifer sat up straighter. Richard looked terrified, but determined. David Park looked confused. Over the past 2 weeks, I continued, I've investigated the vendors this HOA pays over $230,000 annually, and I've discovered that not a single one of them actually exists. Gasps around the room. Karen's face went white, then red. She laughed, but it sounded forced. This is ridiculous. Mrs. Reynolds is making wild accusations because she's upset about her Dog Pacific Property Solutions, I continued loudly. 7 shell companies. $1.2 million stolen, and I can prove all of it. I walked to the front of the room and placed the folder on the table in front of the board. Karen stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely rattled. Her hands were shaking. This meeting is adjourned. No, Jennifer Walsh said firmly, opening the folder. This meeting is not adjourned. Barbara, please continue. Karen's eyes darted between Jennifer, me, Richard, and the packed room of residents, now leaning forward, watching intently. Her perfect mask was cracking, and I was just getting started. This is IT. The confrontation we've been waiting for. What do you think Karen will do now that she's cornered? Will she confess? Run. Fight back. Drop your predictions below. The community center erupted. Karen's perfect mask shattered as 200 angry homeowners realized they'd been robbed. What happened next was the most satisfying moment of my life. Justice was finally served. Jennifer Walsh read through the documents, her lawyer's eyes widening with each page. These companies, none of them are real. Not one, I confirmed. Every address is a mailbox or empty office. No employees, no equipment, no services actually performed, and all of them trace back to Karen Mitchell. The room exploded. Residents shouted questions. Mrs. Patterson stood, her voice shaking with rage. You stole from us, from retirees, on fixed incomes. Karen raised her hand dismissively, trying to regain control. This is absurd. These are legitimate business expenses. Then explain this, Richard Chun interrupted, standing with a document. His hands trembled, but his voice was steady. This email from you, dated July 10th, 2023. Quote, target extraction $2 to $3 million over 3 years. Your own words, Karen. The color drained from Karen's face. You planned this? Jennifer Walsh said slowly, realization dawning. You moved here specifically to rob this community. That email is fabricated. Karen's voice rose, panicked. Richard is trying to frame me because I discovered his affair. There was no affair, Richard said firmly. Just more of your blackmail tactics. I have witnesses who'll testify to that. David Park stood abruptly. I move for an immediate vote to authorize a forensic audit of all HOA finances for the past 18 months, to be conducted by an independent certified fraud examiner. Second, Jennifer said immediately. All in favor? David asked. Aye, Jennifer said. Aye, Richard said. Aye, David said. Susan Martinez looked at Karen desperately. But even she could read the room. Aye, she whispered. 4-1. The audit was approved. Karen grabbed her purse, moving toward the door. This meeting is over. I'm calling my lawyer. Actually, a voice said from the back of the room. You'll be calling a criminal defense attorney. Everyone turned. 2 people in business suits walked down the aisle. The woman held up a badge. Detective Sarah Martinez, Financial Crimes Division. We've been investigating Pacific Property Solutions for several weeks. Ms. Mitchell, we have a warrant for your arrest. My jaw dropped. Richard looked equally shocked. How did you started? Tom Bradford contacted us 6 weeks ago, the detective explained. He had suspicions, but needed proof. When Mr. Chun reached out to us 3 days ago with documentation, we had enough for a warrant. Karen stood frozen, her signature confidence completely gone. She looked small, suddenly, ordinary, just a con artist caught in her own web. Karen Michelle, you're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. You have the right to remain. The detective continued reading Miranda rights while her partner handcuffed Karen. As they led her past me toward the door, Karen's red glasses were askew. Her blonde hair she looked at me with pure hatred. This is your fault, she hissed, all because of your stupid dog. I smiled calmly, stroking Max's head. No, Karen. This is because you're a thief and a bully. Max just helped me see clearly enough to catch you. They took her away. The community center erupted in applause. The forensic audit revealed Karen had stolen $1.4 million, even more than we'd estimated. Federal prosecutors charged her with 19 felonies. She pleaded guilty to avoid trial and received 8 years in federal prison plus full restitution. The board held emergency elections. Jennifer Walsh became president. Richard stayed as treasurer, and they created a new position, community advocate, specifically for investigating resident complaints. They asked me to fill that role. I accepted. My first act, establishing clear policies protecting residents from harassment and ensuring financial transparency. My second, reversing every bogus fine Karen had issued, including my own $1,550. Tom Bradford returned to community events, his reputation restored. The families Karen had forced out were invited back, with apologies and refunds. On a sunny morning in August, I stood at the community center with Max, now officially recognized not just as my service dog, but as an honorary community mascot. The board unveiled a new dog park, the Max Reynolds Memorial Park, though Max wasn't memorial yet, just honored. Mrs. Patterson hugged me. You saved us all, dear. Max saved me first, I replied, scratching behind his ears. I just returned the favor to our community. Richard approached, smiling genuinely for the first time in months. The restitution payments started coming through. Everyone's getting their money back. Good. That's what matters. As I walked home with Max that evening, past freshly painted homes and neighbors who waved warmly, I reflected on the journey. Karen had tried to take everything from me, my home, my companion, my peace. Instead, she'd given me purpose. Sometimes the smallest battles, fighting for your right to keep a service, dog lead, to the biggest victories. And sometimes the people who underestimate you are the easiest to defeat. Karen learned that lesson the hard way. Max wagged his tail, and we walked home together, both of us exactly where we belonged.